The sting of his hand across my face was nothing compared to the sting of betrayal. But that night, as the restaurant fell silent and my cheeks burned, they made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought a declined credit card meant I was broke. They were wrong. It meant I was finally, irrevocably done. My name is Lena Walsh, and I'm 33. On paper, I was successful. A financial manager at Summit and Crew, a logistics company that quietly keeps half the Northeast running. Numbers make sense to me in a way people never have. Maybe that's why, despite all the evidence, it took a public humiliation for me to see the math that had been staring me in the face for years. The Sterling Room was one of those pretentious places. Exposed brick Edison bulbs, a burger that cost more than some people's daily wages. It was Tessa's 18th birthday, my stepsister, and my mother had insisted on something special for her baby girl. I knew exactly what special meant. It meant I'd pay. It always did. I arrived early in the Navy sheath I wore for client meetings, feeling like I was walking into an interrogation. The hostess led me to our table, and my heart sank. There it was, the wobbly chair by the kitchen door, tucked behind a decorative column, where servers would bump me all night. My designated spot. Lena's here, my mother announced when she swept in with Robert and Tessa, her voice tinged with both expectation and subtle disappointment. She air-kissed somewhere near my ear, careful not to smudge her perfect lipstick. Robert, my stepfather, didn't even glance at me. He held chairs for them, then claimed the head of the table like a conquering king. He'd put on weight, his polo shirt straining, probably another one I'd indirectly paid for during one of their manufacturer emergencies. Tessa, I had to admit, looked beautiful. Blonde, curled hair, a pink dress. She flashed me a quick, distant smile, the kind you give a forgotten relative, before turning back to her boyfriend, some Tyler or Taylor, with a blank stare. Her friends soon filled the rest of the seats, all giggling about college and spring break. While they chattered, I meticulously calculated the menu's damage. Lobster, ribeye, salmon, hold the oil, all chosen without a second thought. I, of course, ordered a Caesar salad. That's all. My mother's judgmental tone sliced through the air. You're not on another one of your diets, are you? I lied, just not that hungry. The truth? We were easily looking at an $800 bill. My checking account held $1,200, and rent was due in 5 days. The conversation swirled around me, ignoring me like water around stone. Tessa's friends celebrated her early acceptance to State University, forgetting I'd written her essays. Robert rehashed his ever-changing high school football glory days. My mother laughed too loud at Facebook posts. Not one person asked about my promotion, my recent conference presentation, or anything about me. When the food arrived, I watched them devour it. Tessa meticulously photographed every dish for Instagram. Robert sent his steak back, not hot enough. My mother picked at her salmon, declared herself stuffed after 2 bites, and pushed it away. Then Brittany, one of Tessa's friends, turned to me, probably out of pure social obligation. So, Lena, Tessa says you work with money, financial management. I nodded, corporate logistics. She giggled, and her friends joined in. That sounds boring. Someone has to pay for dinners like this, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. The table fell silent. Robert's fork froze midair. My mother's smile tightened. Tessa broke the tension with a bright, dismissive laugh. She's always been practical, my mother explained to the girls, as if practicality was a character flaw. Even as a child, always counting her pennies. They ordered a massive chocolate cake for dessert, 18 candles blazing. The entire restaurant sang. I smiled, clapped, the perfect good daughter. The reliable one. The one who always picked up the check. The server, accustomed to our routine, laid the leather folder in front of me without a word. They all knew. Everyone at that table knew. I slipped my card inside, not even glancing at the total. A few minutes later, he was back, leaning in conspiratorially. I'm sorry, ma'am, but the card was declined. Do you have another form of payment? The words seemed to hang in the sudden, shocked silence. All eyes swiveled to me. Tessa's friends exchanged horrified glances. My mother formed a perfectly performative O of surprise with her lips. But it was Robert's reaction that etched itself into my memory. He rose slowly, his chair scraping against the polished floor, his face already turning that familiar, terrifying shade of red. The color that meant someone was about to pay for his embarrassment. He stalked around the table, deliberate, menacing. I knew what was coming before his hand even moved. The slap wasn't hard enough to leave a lasting mark. Robert was always careful about that, but in the sudden, cavernous silence of the restaurant, it sounded like a gunshot. My cheek exploded in a burning agony, and I tasted copper where my teeth had bitten the inside of my mouth. "You stupid, useless bitch," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "You can't even do this one simple thing after everything we've done for you." The Sterling room was absolutely silent. Every eye was on us. A woman at the next table had her phone out, probably recording. Tessa wasn't laughing now. She stared at her plate, her birthday tiara askew. I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. From my wallet, I calmly pulled out my emergency visa, the one I kept for actual emergencies, and handed it to the now horrified server. "Run this one," I said, my voice unervingly even. "It'll work." As I waited, I scanned the table. My mother fussed with her napkin, refusing to meet my gaze. Robert had retreated to his seat, muttering about ungrateful children and constant disappointments. Tessa's friends were all suddenly fascinated by their phones. But Tessa herself, she was looking at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not sympathy, not pity, maybe recognition. Maybe she was finally old enough to understand the true cost of her birthday dinners, in every sense of the word. The server returned with my card and the receipt. I added a 40% tip. He didn't deserve to suffer for our family's brokenness. I signed my name with a steady hand. "Happy birthday, Tessa," I said, and then I walked out of the Sterling room, past the hostess, past the valet, and into the cool, liberating April night. My phone began to buzz before I even reached my car. Text after text, call after call. I didn't need to look. I knew what they'd say. As I sat in the driver's seat, my cheeks still throbbing, something deep inside me finally shifted. They thought the decline card meant I was broke. They thought they'd finally bled me dry. But they were wrong. That card had been declined because Robert had opened a supplementary account in my name 3 days prior, maxing it out before I even knew it existed. I'd seen the notification that afternoon, and I'd made a choice not to cover it. I wanted to see what would happen. Now I knew. And now, finally, I was done. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine off, just breathing. My phone pulsed with light in the darkness, a desperate lighthouse. 37. Missed calls, 53 texts. I finally turned it face down and drove home in blessed silence. To truly understand why I stayed so long, why I kept paying, you have to understand how it all began. I was 11 when my mother met Robert. 3 years earlier, my father had simply walked out one Tuesday morning and never returned. No explanation, no support, just gone. My mother never recovered. She wore her desperation like a shroud, and Robert, a regional manager with too much cologne and a booming, self-congratulatory laugh, smelled it from across a crowded room. They married quickly, a courthouse ceremony. I was the only witness, an awkward preteen in an outgrown Easter dress. Robert tried at first to win me over. Ice cream, movies, the occasional, "How was school, kiddo?" But I didn't warm to him. I didn't call him Dad. I didn't pretend he belonged in our small apartment. His interest in me quickly curdled. "She's a bit cold, isn't she?" I heard him tell my mother one night. Not very affectionate. My mother weakly defended me. "She's shy. She'll warm up." But I didn't. By 14, Robert had stopped trying. I became furniture in my own home, occasionally useful, mostly ignored. When Tessa, my stepsister, was born, I naively hoped a baby might soften him. I was wrong. Tessa's arrival solidified my place. She was the real daughter, the wanted one, the fresh start. I was merely a sullen reminder of my mother's failed first marriage, a mismatched piece in Robert's perfect family portrait. "Lena, watch the baby while we go to dinner." "Lena, Tessa needs a diaper change." "Lena, why is she crying? You must have done something." I became an unpaid nanny, expected to be grateful for the privilege. At 15, I got my first job, bagging groceries. Robert immediately declared my paychecks family contributions. Room and board aren't free. He'd sneer, hand outstretched every Friday. My mother said nothing. She'd perfected the art of selective blindness, floating through life on a cloud of white wine and willful ignorance. As long as Robert stayed, as long as she wasn't alone again, everything was fine. I saved what little I could, stashing 20s and 30s in a tampon box under my sink. It took 2 years to save enough for college applications. When my acceptance letter to State University arrived, along with a partial scholarship, Robert's first words were, "How are you planning to pay for the rest?" When I mentioned student loans and work study, he scoffed. "Loans? You'll be paying those off till you're 50. Better to skip the whole thing. I can get you full-time in my buddy's warehouse." But I went anyway. I survived on ramen and sheer determination. I majored in finance because I swore I would never again be financially vulnerable. I wanted to understand money, how to make it, keep it, grow it, how to never end up like my mother, dependent on a man who treated kindness like currency. Throughout college, the calls began, always framed as emergencies. My mother, her voice trembling, the car broke down, and Robert's between jobs. "Just this once, we'll pay you back." Then, "Tessa needs braces. Insurance won't cover it all. You understand, don't you?" Soon, it was the landlord's threatening eviction. "Robert's commission check is late. Just until Friday. I promise." The promises were as hollow as my bank account became, but I kept sending money. The alternative, letting my baby sister suffer for our parents' failures, felt worse than my own hunger pangs. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at Summit and Crew. I moved into a studio apartment 40 minutes from my childhood home, far enough to feel like an escape, yet close enough for my mother's guilt to still reach me. The pattern solidified. I'd build up my savings, then drain them for the next family crisis. Robert's job losses became suspiciously regular, always coinciding with rent due dates. My mother developed mysterious illnesses requiring expensive treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. And Tessa, sweet, spoiled Tessa, always needed something for school, for dance, for the endless activities meant to burnish her college applications. "You don't have kids," my mother would remind me during our weekly calls. "You don't understand the expenses. And you're doing so well now. It's what family does." What family does, as if family was a one-way street where I gave and they took, where my success was communal property, but my struggles were mine alone. I started keeping a spreadsheet, not out of resentment at first, just habit. I tracked everything. But as the numbers swelled, as $50 became $500, then $5,000, then more than I wanted to acknowledge, the document transformed. It became evidence, proof that I wasn't imagining the imbalance. $2,400 for Robert's emergency dental work that turned out to be cosmetic veneers. $3,800 for Tessa's dance competition trips. $15,000 over 3 years for their rent when Robert was between opportunities. For $1,500 for my mother's therapy, which I later discovered were spa retreats. The spreadsheet grew like a tumor. Each line item a small, sickening betrayal. Yet I kept paying, because that's what good daughters did. Because Tessa was innocent. Because my mother would cry and say I was all she had. Because I simply didn't know how to stop. The insidious thing about financial abuse is its mundanity. There's no dramatic music, no obvious villain twirling a mustache. Just a steady drain, like a leak in your roof, you keep meaning to fix until one day you look up and realize the whole ceiling is about to collapse. By my 30th birthday, I was making good money. 2 promotions, my own office with a window, a reliable car. From the outside, I'd made it. Inside, I was hollow. Every raise meant more money for them to request. Every bonus became a family emergency waiting to happen. I dated occasionally. But how do you explain that you can't go on vacation because your mother suddenly needs new kitchen cabinets? How do you admit you're a successful professional who can't say no to people who barely acknowledge your existence until they need something? "You'll understand when you have your own family," my mother would say when I tried to set boundaries. Blood is blood. But Tessa wasn't fully my blood, and Robert certainly wasn't. Yet somehow, I'd become responsible for all of them. The family ATM that never ran empty. 3 months before Tessa's 18th birthday, I finally started therapy. Dr. Marcus, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, listened without judgment. "Why do you think you keep giving them money?" she asked during our 4th session. "Because they need it," I said, the answer automatic ingrained. Do they? Or do they just want it? The question haunted me. Need versus want. Survival versus comfort. Love versus manipulation. What would happen if you said no? Dr. Marcus pressed gently. I couldn't answer. I never tried. The fear of their reaction, of being cast out, of proving Robert right, that I was cold and unloving, it kept me compliant. But that night at the Sterling Room, with my cheeks stinging, the taste of blood in my mouth, I finally had my answer. Saying yes hadn't earned me love or respect, or even basic kindness. It had only earned me a seat by the kitchen door and a slap when the well ran dry. They thought I was broke. Let them think it. The truth, that I had $47,000 in savings and excellent credit, would come out soon enough. But not in the way they expected. As I drove home that April night, I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was just done. Done pretending. Done paying. Done being the family safety net that everyone took for granted. But the universe has a funny way of showing you exactly who people are when you stop being useful to them. By the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, please hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the wild twists and turns still to come. The call started at 6 a.m. the next morning. My mother, having clearly spent the night strategizing, launched her guilt campaign with military precision. "Lena, honey, I'm so sorry about last night. Robert was just stressed. You know how he gets. But we need to talk about the bills. The mortgage is due Monday, and with your little stunt at dinner." I hung up. She called back instantly. I let it go to voicemail. "I'm really disappointed in you after everything we've done. Raising you, giving you a home. Tessa was in tears all night, on her birthday. How could you be so selfish?" Delete. By noon, the messages escalated from guilt to anger, then to outright manipulation. Robert left 3 voicemails, each threatening legal action for theft of services. Apparently, not paying for his dinner was a crime. Tessa's texts pinged, alternating between wounded innocence, "I thought you loved me," and teenage nastiness. "Tyler says you're probably just jealous because you're single and bitter." I turn off my phone. "You look terrible," my colleague Marcus observed in our Monday morning meeting. "Everything okay?" "Family stuff," I sighed. He nodded knowingly. Everyone had family stuff, but mine was about to get far more complicated than I could have imagined. When I finally turned my phone back on Tuesday evening, I had 43 missed calls from my mother, 18 from Robert, and 1 from my credit card company. The credit card message was the one that truly mattered. "This is regarding unusual activity on your account, ending in 4458. Please call us immediately." I knew, even before I called, what I would find. The supplementary card Robert had opened, the one I discovered just before Tessa's dinner, was merely the tip of the iceberg. As the patient representative calmly walked me through the recent charges, a picture emerged that was both shocking and sickeningly predictable. $8,000 at a jewelry store the day before Tessa's birthday. $3,200 at Best Buy for an entire home entertainment system. $5,500 in cash advances. $2,100 at a high-end men's clothing store. All in the past 2 weeks. All on cards I didn't know existed. "We flagged these as potentially fraudulent," the representative stated carefully. "Would you like to dispute them?" "Yes," I said, my voice cold and hard. "All of them. And I need to check if there are any other accounts I don't know about." There were 3 additional credit cards, a personal line of credit, and this was the one that made my hands shake, an attempt to refinance my car, which had only failed because they'd gotten my employment details wrong. 23 years of financial carefulness, of building perfect credit, of sacrificing and saving, and they tried to destroy it all in less than a month. I spent the rest of the week on the phone, with banks, credit bureaus, and finally, a lawyer specializing in financial fraud, Patricia Hernandez. Patricia, in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, was instantly comforting. "Family identity theft is more common than you'd think," she explained. It's also harder to prosecute because victims often refuse to press charges. They feel guilty. They make excuses. They enable. I'm done enabling, I stated flatly. Good, she said. Then let's talk about your options. As Patricia outlined the legal process, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not for reconciliation. That ship had sailed the moment Robert's hand connected with my face. But for freedom. Real, unequivocal freedom. My mother, meanwhile, entered phase 3 of her campaign, recruiting flying monkeys. My phone buzzed with messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all variations of, your mom is worried sick, family is everything, and don't you think you're overreacting? My personal favorite came from Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, who lived in Florida and had borrowed $3,000 from me 5 years ago for a medical emergency that turned out to be a facelift. Your mother says you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should see someone. I was seeing someone, Patricia Hernandez, and she was worth every penny of her $400 hourly rate. The evidence gathering was meticulous. Bank statements going back years. Email chains where my mother casually mentioned my social security number for insurance purposes. Text messages where Robert asked for my banking passwords to help with your taxes. Every red flag I'd ignored, every boundary I'd let them cross. It was all there in black and white. This is good, Patricia said, reviewing my documentation. Really good. But I need to warn you. Once we file, there's no going back. This will likely result in criminal charges. I understand. Do you, Lena? Your stepfather could face jail time. Your mother could be charged as an accomplice. Are you prepared for that? I thought about all the dinners I'd eaten alone in my studio apartment, too broke to go out after paying their bills. I thought about the vacations I'd never taken, the relationships that had withered, because I was always too stressed about money to be fully present. I thought about the spreadsheet, $128,000 over 12 years. Enough for a house down payment. Enough for a better life. Enough for the freedom I'd never allowed myself. I'm prepared, I said. Patricia nodded. Then let's discuss the nuclear option. She explained that Robert had been claiming me as a dependent on his taxes for 3 years, even though I hadn't lived with them for over a decade. Tax fraud. Pure and simple. The IRS offers whistleblower rewards, Patricia continued. Up to 30% of the recovered amount. Given what you've shown me, we're looking at significant back taxes, penalties, and interest. The number she quoted made my head swim. It was more than I made in a year. But the money wasn't the point. The point was consequences. For once in their lives, Robert and my mother would face actual, undeniable consequences. That Friday, 2 weeks after Tessa's birthday dinner, my mother showed up at my office. Security called, and I watched on the lobby camera as she argued with the guard, her designer purse, one I'd probably paid for, clutched dramatically to her chest. I'm her mother, she shrieked. This is a family emergency. The only emergency was that their cash cow had finally run dry. I had security escort her out. She left sobbing, mascara streaming down her face. Several coworkers saw the scene. I felt the familiar burn of embarrassment, but underneath it, something new stirred. Pure relief. That weekend, I went apartment hunting. Not because I needed to move, my studio was fine, but because I could. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't mentally calculating how much I'd need to keep in reserve for the next family crisis. My money was actually mine. I found a 1-bedroom in a better neighborhood, with real closet space and a balcony overlooking a small park. The rent was only $200 more than my studio. In the past, that would have been $200 I couldn't spare. I'll take it, I told the landlord. While packing, I found the old tampon box where I'd hidden cash as a teenager. Inside, $340 in crumpled bills. My escape fund that had never been enough to actually escape. I smoothed out each bill, remembering the shifts I'd worked, the lunches I'd skipped, the freedom I'd dreamed of. Now, I finally had that freedom, but it had come at a price I was still calculating. As I packed, Tessa texted, Mom says you're being a expletive. Dad might lose his job. Because of you. Hope you're happy. I stared at the message. Dad. She called him Dad. This man who'd stolen from both of us. But she was 18 now, an adult. She'd sat there and watched him hit me. She'd smiled and whispered to her boyfriend like it was dinner theater. I typed back, "I am happy," for the first time in years. "Good luck at college." Then, with a deep breath, I blocked her number. The moving truck was scheduled for next Saturday. Patricia would file the paperwork on Monday. The IRS investigation would begin within the month. The wheels I'd set in motion couldn't be stopped now, even if I wanted to. And I didn't. That night, in my soon-to-be former studio, I opened a bottle of good wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, and updated my spreadsheet one last time. At the bottom, I added a new column, amount recovered. It was still at zero, but it wouldn't stay that way. For 12 years, I'd paid the price for their love. Now, it was time for them to pay it back. With interest. Moving day arrived, complete with an unexpected spectator. As I carried boxes down to the truck, I spotted Robert's silver Lexus, the one I'd co-signed for 2 years ago, parked across the street. He sat behind the wheel, watching me with an unnerving intensity that made my skin crawl. I ignored him, loading boxes as if he didn't exist. 20 minutes later, my mother joined him. They sat there for 3 hours, cigarette smoke occasionally drifting from Robert's cracked window, as if their mere presence might guilt me into stopping, into dropping the charges, into resuming my role as their personal ATM. My new apartment building boasted better security, a doorman, key card access, lobby cameras. It cost more, but Patricia had advised me to upgrade my safety measures. People get unpredictable when money's involved, she'd warned. Especially family. The legal papers were served the following Monday. Patricia had them delivered to Robert's workplace for maximum impact, ensuring he couldn't claim ignorance. I wasn't there to witness his reaction, but I heard about it from a former colleague. He went ballistic, she told me over coffee, screaming about ungrateful children and conspiracies. Security had to escort him out. He was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. The investigation. That was the key. Once banks and credit companies realize fraud is involved, they dig deep. Every suspicious transaction, every forged signature, every lie comes to light. And Robert had been sloppy, arrogant in his certainty that I'd never fight back. My mother tried a different approach. She flooded my inbox with long, rambling emails, alternating between sentimental memories and thinly veiled threats. "Remember when you were 7 and had pneumonia? I stayed up all night with you, putting cold washcloths on your forehead." Followed by, "Your father left us with nothing. Robert saved us. You're destroying our lives. Tessa might not go to college now because of you." And then, the chilling closer. "I know where you work. I know your routines. You can't hide forever." I forwarded every single email to Patricia. Documentation was everything. The financial forensics soon revealed more than even I had expected. Robert hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been running similar scams on 2 elderly neighbors, sweet-talking them into adding him to their accounts. He'd taken $15,000 from one, $22,000 from the other. "This changes things," Patricia explained. "With multiple victims, the DA will absolutely pursue criminal charges. Elder financial abuse is a felony." I felt sick. How many others had there been? How many people had Robert charmed and robbed while I was unknowingly enabling him by covering his family's expenses? 3 weeks into the legal process, I experienced my first real victory. The credit bureaus removed all the fraudulent accounts from my report. My score, which had plummeted to 580, shot back up to 745. It was just numbers on a screen, but I cried when I saw it. Years of careful building, destroyed in weeks, now restored with the stroke of a judge's pen. The restraining order came next. After my mother's emails escalated and Robert was caught on my new building's cameras trying to talk his way past the doorman, Patricia fast-tracked the protective order. The hearing was the first time I'd seen my mother since her office visit. She'd aged 10 years in a month. Her usually perfect hair hung limp, her designer clothes replaced by an ill-fitting pantsuit. She wouldn't look at me, her eyes fixed on her public defender. They couldn't afford Patricia's equivalent. Robert wasn't there. He'd been arrested the night before on the elder fraud charges and was sitting in county jail, unable to make bail. Without my income or the money he'd stolen, they were broke. Your Honor, my mother's lawyer began, my client is this young woman's mother. Surely a restraining order between parent and child is excessive. The judge interrupted, reviewing the file. Your client, Ms. Walsh, is named as an accomplice in multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. The emails submitted show a clear pattern of harassment and escalating threats. The order is granted. 500 feet. They couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. It was a circle of safety legally enforced. As we left the courthouse, my mother finally looked at me. For a second, her mask slipped, and I saw it. Pure hatred. Not disappointment, not hurt. Hatred, as if I was the one who had stolen, who had lied, who had drained her dry. I hope you're happy, she hissed. I'm getting there, I replied. The IRS moved slower than the criminal courts, but Patricia assured me they were thorough. The audit notice arrived at my mother's house, my former home, in late May. 3 years of fraudulent tax returns claiming me as a dependent, plus Robert's unreported income from his various scams, plus penalties and interest. The total they owed was staggering. Tessa graduated high school the first week of June. I knew because her Instagram was still public, filled with photos of her in cap and gown. My mother stood beside her in one photo, her smile strained, looking gaunt in a dress I recognized from 5 years ago. Robert was notably absent, still in jail, awaiting trial. Looking at those photos, I felt a pang. Tessa looked young, scared beneath her smile. College was probably off the table now, at least the expensive state school she planned on. Community college and student loans would be her reality, the same reality I'd faced at her age, but for different reasons. A part of me, the old Lena, wanted to reach out to offer money. I almost laughed. The cycle was trying to perpetuate itself already. No, Tessa had made her choice that night at the restaurant. She'd have to live with the consequences, just like I had. My therapy sessions with Dr. Marcus became my lifeline. You're grieving, she observed during one session. Not for who they were, but for who you wanted them to be. She was right. I mourned the mother who'd never existed, the one who would have protected me instead of serving me up to keep her husband happy. I mourned the sister who might have been if she hadn't been taught from birth that I was hired help. I even mourned the life I might have had, the savings, the travel, the peace of mind, if I hadn't spent 12 years lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late, volunteered for presentations. My boss, Sarah, noticed the change. You seem different, she said during my quarterly review. More confident, more present. I've had some personal changes, I admitted. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. We're promoting you to senior manager. The pay increase was substantial. More than I'd ever made. More than Robert had ever made, even with his inflated claims of sales prowess. I signed the paperwork with hands that barely shook. That night, I went out to celebrate alone, but not lonely. I sat at the bar of an upscale restaurant, the kind of place I'd never have gone before, too worried about saving money for the next family emergency. Celebrating something? The bartender asked. My independence, I said, raising my glass. He smiled, pouring himself a shot of water. To independence. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. No guilt attached, no worry about what it would cost me later. Just happiness, clean and bright as the wine in my glass. The emails from my mother had stopped after the restraining order, but others had taken up the cause. Distant relatives, family friends, even my old high school guidance counselor. All with variations of family is everything, and you'll regret this someday. I didn't respond to any of them. They hadn't been there for the midnight calls about money. They hadn't watched my bank account drain month after month. They hadn't felt the sting of Robert's hand or the weight of my mother's calculated blindness. Let them judge. I was done explaining myself to people who'd already chosen their side. Patricia called with regular updates. Robert's public offender was attempting a plea bargain, but with multiple victims and a clear pattern of fraud, the DA wasn't interested. Trial was set for September. You'll need to testify, Patricia warned. Are you ready for that? Was I ready to sit in a courtroom and detail 12 years of financial abuse? To look Robert in the eye and tell the truth he'd always denied? To watch my mother's face as I explained how they'd systematically destroyed my trust, along with my credit? I'm ready, I said, and I was. In July, 2 months after my move, a birthday card arrived, forwarded from my old address. My mother's handwriting, shaky, was on the redirected envelope. Inside, a generic Hallmark message about daughters with her signature. No personal note, no mention of everything that had happened. Just her name. Tucked inside was a photo from Tessa's 5th birthday party. I was 19, home from college, holding a giggling Tessa on my hip as she smeared chocolate cake on my cheek. We were both laughing. I looked so young, so hopeful, unaware that I was already 3 years into paying for their lives. I stared at the photo for a long time, then placed it in my desk drawer. Not in the trash, but not on display either. Some things deserve to be remembered, even if they hurt. August brought the intense trial prep. Patricia's office became my second home as we reviewed 12 years of evidence. Bank statements, emails, text messages, recorded phone calls. My obsessive documentation was about to pay off. "You're my favorite kind of client," Patricia said one afternoon, reviewing my files. Organized, thorough, and angry enough to see this through. "I'm not angry," I protested. She looked at me over her glasses. "You should be. They stole more than money from you. They stole years of your life." She was right. I was angry. Furious, actually. But it was a cold fury now, crystallized into purpose. They'd taken enough. Not one penny more. The week before the trial, I had an unexpected visitor at work. Tessa stood in the lobby, looking smaller than her 18 years, in a sundress I didn't recognize. Security called. I debated refusing to see her, but curiosity won. We met in the public cafe on the ground floor. Safe, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. "You look good," she said, fidgeting with her iced coffee. "The promotion suits you. How did you know about that?" "LinkedIn. I've been keeping track." We sat in silence for a moment. Up close, I could see the stress in her face. Dark circles, bitten nails, the kind of thinness that comes from anxiety rather than diet. "Why are you here, Tessa?" I wanted to say I'm sorry. About the restaurant. About everything. I waited. Sorry was a start, but it wasn't enough. "I've been thinking," she continued, "about all those years you were always there, always helping. And I just took advantage." She flinched but nodded. "Mom says you're being vindictive, that you're trying to destroy us. But I've been going through old photos, old emails. You paid for everything, didn't you? My dance classes, my school trips, even my prom dress." "Yes." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but the answer was complicated. "Because you were a kid. Because it wasn't your fault. Because I thought if I gave enough, eventually I'd get something back. Love. Respect would have been enough." She started crying then, ugly sobs that drew stares from other patrons. I handed her napkins and waited. I'd cried enough of my own tears. I could weather hers. "I testified yesterday," she said when she could speak again, for the prosecution. "About the birthday dinner. About things I overheard. About Dad. Robert bragging about using your information." This was news. Patricia hadn't mentioned Tessa was cooperating. That must have been hard. He's been lying to us for years. Taking money from other people, too. Mom knew. She had to know. Tessa wiped her eyes. "I got into State University, but I can't go. No money, and no one will co-sign loans because of all this. I'm taking a gap year, working at Target. The old me would have offered to help, would have reached for my checkbook to fix it, to ease her pain. But I kept my hands folded on the table. Community college is a good option," I said instead. "That's where I started. Transfer after 2 years. It's cheaper, and you'll get the same degree. You're not going to help me." It wasn't a question, and I respected her more for not making it one. "No, I'm not. Not with money. But if you want advice about financial aid, scholarships, building credit, I can offer that." She nodded, gathering her dignity. "That's fair. More than fair, probably." We talked for another 20 minutes, not about the trial or the family, but about practical things, budgeting, FAFSA applications, work-study programs. The kind of guidance I'd had to figure out alone at her age. When she left, She paused at the door. Lena, that night at the restaurant, I should have said something when he hit you. I was scared, but that's not an excuse. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. That weekend, I finally did something I've been putting off for years. I went through the physical reminders of my old life. Boxes of photos, birthday cards, the world's best sister mug Tessa had given me when she was 7. Each item was a small grief, a fragment of a moment when I believed things might actually get better. I kept a few things. The mug, because it reminded me of the hopeful child Tessa had been. A photo of my college graduation, where I stood alone because my family had been too busy to attend. A car my mother had given me when I got my first job, from when she still seemed proud of me. The rest went into the donation bin. I didn't need artifacts from a life I was leaving behind. The trial started on a Tuesday. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one I reserved for important client meetings. Patricia met me outside the courthouse, briefcase in hand, her face set in a look of grim determination. Remember, she said, stick to the facts. Don't editorialize. Let the evidence speak for itself. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Robert sat at the defense table, wearing an ill-fitting suit, the gaunt face of a man who'd finally run out of people to con. His once commanding presence was reduced to nothing. My mother sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed in black, as if in mourning, clutching tissues she never actually used. When I took the stand, our eyes met briefly. I searched for something, remorse, understanding, even honest hatred. But there was only the same calculated blankness she perfected over the years. Testifying was easier than I'd expected. Patricia had prepared me well, and the prosecutor methodically walked me through the evidence. Bank statements appeared on screens. Emails were read into the record. That comprehensive spreadsheet, my silent accounting of their debt, was displayed for the jury to see. Can you tell us the total amount you gave to the defendants over 12 years? $128, $743, I said clearly, my voice steady. Not including interest on credit cards they opened in my name, or the opportunities one missed because I couldn't afford them. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a bitter woman seeking revenge. He highlighted my good salary, my recent promotion, suggesting I could easily afford to help family in need. Isn't it true you voluntarily gave these funds? He pressed. No one forced you. Financial coercion is still force, I replied. When you're told your sister won't eat unless you pay. When you're blamed for every hardship. When helping is the only way to maintain any relationship with your family. Yes, that's force. He pushed harder, but the evidence was overwhelming. The credit cards opened without my permission. The tax fraud. The elderly neighbors Robert had robbed. It painted a damning picture of systematic, deliberate crime. I was on the stand for 3 hours. When I finally stepped down, I felt empty but clean, like I'd lanced an infection that had been poisoning me for years. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Robert's face when they read the verdict was something I'll never forget. The moment a man who had always talked his way out of consequences realized the bill had finally come due. Sentencing would come later, but the prosecutor estimated 3 to 5 years, plus restitution. My mother wasn't charged as an accomplice. Insufficient evidence of direct participation, but she'd lost everything anyway. The house, the car, the lifestyle built on my exhaustion and others' trust. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand. You did good. How do you feel? Free, I said. She smiled. That's the point. The money you'll get from restitution and the IRS whistleblower claim, that's just a bonus. The real win is getting your life back. That night, I sat in my apartment, my safe, quiet apartment, and opened a bottle of champagne. I bought it the day I filed charges, saving it for this exact moment. The cork popped with a satisfying sound. I poured a glass, toasting to no one but myself. My phone sat silent on the counter. No guilt trip calls, no emergency texts, no demands disguised as requests. Just peaceful, blessed silence. I thought about Tessa starting her job at Target next week. About my mother probably staying with one of those relatives who'd insisted family was everything. About Robert sitting in a cell, no one left to manipulate. They'd all made their choices. Now they were living with them. and for the first time in my adult life. So, was I? September arrived with that perfect autumn crispness, making everything feel possible. I've been living in silence for 3 blessed weeks. No family drama, no crisis calls, no emotional manipulation disguised as love. Just the normal rhythm of work, sleep, and slowly, gently, learning who I was without the weight of other people's expectations. Then Patricia called with news that would change everything. "The IRS investigation is complete," she said. "Are you sitting down?" I was at my desk, reviewing quarterly reports. Should I be? The whistleblower claim was approved. Back taxes, penalties, interest from 3 years of fraudulent returns, plus Robert's unreported income from his various schemes. The total recovery was $247,000. My portion, 30%. I did the math automatically. $74,100. Not a fortune in the grand scheme of things, but more than I'd ever had at once. More than I'd given them in some years. "There's more," Patricia continued. "The criminal restitution hearing is next week. The judge will order Robert to repay what he stole, including the elderly neighbors. You're first in line as a creditor. $31,000 from the fraudulent credit cards and identity theft. Whether you'll ever see it is another question, but it'll follow him for life. No bankruptcy discharge for criminal restitution." After I hung up, I stared at my computer screen. The numbers meant less than I'd expected. What mattered was what they represented. Validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't selfish, wasn't the ungrateful daughter they'd painted me as. The system had looked at the evidence and sided with me. That weekend, I did something I'd been afraid to do for months. I checked Tessa's social media. Her Instagram had gone private, but her LinkedIn was public. She'd started at Target, but her profile also mentioned weekend classes at community college, a business administration major. I felt a flicker of pride. She was figuring it out the hard way, just like I had. My mother's Facebook was still public, probably because she didn't know how to change the settings. The carefully curated life was gone. No more restaurant check-ins or shopping hauls. The most recent post was a shared article about forgiveness, with her comment, "Some people can hold grudges forever. I choose love and light." The comments below were a masterclass in enabling. "Stay strong, Linda. Family troubles are so hard. Your daughter will regret this one day." I almost laughed. Love and light, but only when it didn't cost her anything. The restitution hearing was brief. Robert appeared in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The federal charges meant he'd been transferred to a higher security facility. He kept his eyes down as the judge read the order. $31,000 to me, $37,000 total to the elderly neighbors. Payment plans to begin upon release. My mother wasn't there. Small mercies. October brought unexpected, life-altering changes. Sarah, my boss, pulled me in her office. "We're opening a new branch in Chicago," she said. "I want you to run it. Full relocation package, significant salary increase, and a chance to build your own team. Chicago, 800 miles from here. From them. From every restaurant and street corner that held memories I wanted to forget. When do you need an answer? Take a week. This is a big decision, but it wasn't not really. I accepted the next day. The move happened fast. The company hired professional packers, arranged temporary housing, even flew me out for a long weekend to look at apartments. I chose a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. It cost 3 times my old studio, but I could afford it now. Not just financially, but emotionally. I deserve nice things. I deserved a view. My last week in town, I had one final visitor, Dr. Marcus. She'd agreed to an extra session before I transferred to a colleague in Chicago. "How are you feeling about the move?" she asked. Relieved, excited, a little guilty. Guilty for being happy? For not feeling worse about how things ended? Shouldn't I be grieving more? Dr. Marcus smiled. "Lena, you've been grieving for years. For the family you should have had. The support you deserved. The life you might have lived. The fact that you can feel joy now, that's not something to feel guilty about. That's healing." She was right. I'd done my grieving in real time, spread over 12 years of disappointment. This wasn't the sharp pain of fresh loss. It was the dull ache of accepting what had always been true. They'd never loved me the way I'd loved them. And that was okay. It had to be. My going-away party at work was small but warm. Colleagues I'd kept at arm's length for years suddenly felt like the family I'd chosen. They gave me a Cubs jersey and a deep-dish pizza cookbook, joking that I need to learn the local customs. Marcus from accounting pulled me aside. "I'm glad you're getting out," he said quietly. "Fresh starts are underrated." Speaking from experience, I left my entire family in Texas 10 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. The night before my flight, I did a final check of my old apartment. Everything was gone except the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors. I stood at the window where I'd watched my mother and Robert in their car that day, trying to intimidate me into compliance. They'd lost, not just in court, but in the larger battle for my life. They wanted me small, grateful, perpetually giving. Instead, I was leaving bigger, freer, and finally putting myself first. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Lena, the voice was thin-aged. It took a moment to recognize Aunt Helen. "I'm calling about your mother. I can't help her. She's sick. Really sick this time. Cancer. She needs—" I hung up. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd paid for her choices, and Robert's, and even Tess's. For over a decade, the Bank of Lena was permanently closed. The flight to Chicago was bumpy, but I didn't mind. Turbulence felt appropriate for a life change this big. I pressed my face to the window as the city appeared below. Massive, sprawling, full of possibility. My temporary housing was a furnished corporate apartment in the Loop. I arrived at sunset, the sky painting the buildings gold and pink. After the driver left, I stood at the window, 30 floors up, watching the city pulse with life. I was alone. No family within hundreds of miles. No one who knew my history, my old role as the family savior. I could be anyone here. I could be myself, whoever that turned out to be. That night, I ordered Thai food from a place down the street. When the delivery guy asked if I was new to the building, I said yes. "Welcome to Chicago," he said with a genuine smile. "You're going to love it." Here, as I ate my pad thai in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and possibility, I thought about the IRS check that would arrive soon, about the job that started Monday, about the life I was building on my own terms. The old me would have felt guilty for not sharing this good fortune, would have calculated how much I could send home, how much suffering I could alleviate. But the old me had died in that restaurant, with the taste of blood in her mouth and her cheeks stinging from a slap she'd never seen coming. This new me? She was keeping every penny. She was building a future. She was choosing herself. Finally, completely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Without reading it, I blocked it and set the phone aside. Whatever crisis was brewing back home, it wasn't mine to solve. Outside, Chicago glittered like a promise. Tomorrow, I'd start exploring my new neighborhood. Next week, I'd start my new job. Next month, maybe I'd even try dating again without the baggage of family drama hanging over every conversation. But tonight, I just sat in my window and watched the city lights, feeling something I hadn't experienced in over a decade. Peace. The bill had finally been paid. Not by them. They'd never truly pay for what they'd taken. But by me. In years of therapy, in difficult boundaries, in the sheer courage to walk away from people who'd convinced me their love depended on my usefulness. It was expensive, that freedom. But sitting there in my new city, with my new life spread before me like an unwritten check, I knew one thing for certain. It was worth every single penny. The Chicago winter hit with a vengeance I wasn't prepared for. By December, the wind off Lake Michigan felt like tiny knives against any exposed skin. But I loved it. The cold felt clean. Honest. Nothing like the suffocating warmth of family gatherings where everyone pretended things were fine. My new office was on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, a team of 12 people who looked to me for leadership. The first few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategic planning, proving I deserved the position. "You're different from what I expected," James, one of my analysts, observed after an intense budget meeting. "How so?" Most new directors come in trying to change everything immediately. You actually listen. I learned the hard way that truly hearing people, not just waiting for your turn to talk, was a rare skill. All those years of reading between the lines of my family's demands had taught me to pay attention to what wasn't being said. The IRS check arrived on a Tuesday in early December. I deposited it immediately, then sat in my car, staring at the bank receipt. $74,100. More money than I'd ever seen at once. In the past, a windfall like this would have triggered a dozen family emergencies. Now it was just mine. I met with a financial advisor the next week. "What are your goals?" she asked. "Security," I said without hesitation. "I want to know I'll never be vulnerable again." We set up a diversified portfolio, some conservative, some growth-focused, all designed to ensure I'd never have to depend on anyone else. It felt like building a fortress out of numbers and compound interest. Christmas approached with all the subtlety of a freight train. Store windows glittered with family scenes. Commercials preached togetherness, and my inbox filled with holiday party invitations. I accepted them all. Why not? I had nowhere else to be. At the company Christmas party, held at an upscale hotel, I found myself actually enjoying the festivities. My team had exceeded fourth-quarter projections, and Sarah, my boss, had flown in from headquarters to celebrate. "You've transformed this branch," she said over champagne. "I knew you were the right choice. Thank you for taking a chance on me." "It wasn't a chance," I replied. "It was a calculation, and it paid off." As midnight approached, my phone buzzed with a notification I'd been dreading. A Facebook memory. 5 years ago, a family Christmas photo. I stood slightly apart, my smile not quite reaching my eyes, while Robert's hand rested possessively on my mother's shoulder, and Tessa opened presents I'd paid for. I deleted the app entirely. Some memories weren't worth keeping. January brought something unexpected, a letter forwarded from my old address. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but familiar. Inside, a single sheet of notebook paper. "Lena, I'm writing this from Springfield Women's Correctional. Got 18 months for check fraud. Guess Robert wasn't the only one who got caught. I know you won't read this, but I need to say it anyway. I was a terrible mother. I chose him over you every time. I told myself I was keeping the family together. But really, I was just scared of being alone again. I let him hurt you because it was easier than standing up to him. You deserve better. You deserved a mother who protected you instead of serving you up like a sacrifice. I see that now. Too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just needed you to know that I know what I did, what I didn't do. Take care of yourself the way I never did. Linda." I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something. Satisfaction? Vindication? Sorrow? But there was only a hollow acknowledgement. She knew. She'd always known. That almost made it worse. I filed the letter with my other legal documents and moved on. February brought better surprises. I joined a hiking group, indoor rock climbing during winter, and met people who knew nothing about my past. There was freedom in that, in being just Lena, who worked in finance and couldn't quite master belaying knots. "You're too much in your head," Marcus, a teacher from Lincoln Park, said during one climbing session. "Trust your body. It knows what to do." It was good advice for more than just climbing. The restitution payments started arriving in March. $200 a month, automatically deducted from Robert's prison work program earnings. It would take decades to pay off at that rate, but the principle mattered more than the money. Every month, a small reminder that actions had consequences. I used the first payment to buy myself something I'd always wanted but never felt I deserved, a really good winter coat. Cashmere and wool, tailored to fit perfectly. Warm enough to make Chicago winters bearable. It cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, and I didn't feel guilty for a second. April marked 1 year since the birthday dinner. I'd planned to let the anniversary pass unnoticed. But my Chicago therapist, Dr. Winters, had other ideas. "Anniversaries of trauma can be powerful," she said. "Ignoring them doesn't make them go away. What if you reclaim this date?" So, on April 15th, I threw myself a party. Nothing fancy, just dinner at a good restaurant with my climbing friends, my work team, and a handful of Chicago people who'd become my chosen family. We ate too much, drank good wine, and nobody slapped me when the check came. What are we celebrating? James asked as I raised a toast. Freedom, I said, and really good friends. They cheered and clinked glasses, not needing to know the whole story to celebrate with me. That was the beauty of chosen family. They showed up without requiring payment. As I walked home that night, slightly tipsy and genuinely happy, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from home. Hello, Lena. It's me, Tessa. I stopped walking. We hadn't spoken since that day at the cafe. How did you get this number? LinkedIn. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted you to know I got my associate degree. Graduated with honors. I'm transferring a state in the fall with a full scholarship. That's wonderful, Tessa. Really, I've been working 2 jobs and taking extra classes. It's been hard, but I get it now. Why you were always so tired. Why you saved every penny. I get it. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, gathering courage. I also wanted to tell you that Mom's out. She's living with Aunt Helen in Florida. And Robert, he got another 5 years. Try to run the same scam in prison. If you can believe it. I could believe it. Leopards and spots and all that. Are you okay? I asked. With money? I mean school. I'm figuring it out. Loans, work study, scholarships. The hard way like you did. She paused. I'm not asking for money. I wanted you to know I'm okay, and that I'm sorry for everything. I know you are. Maybe someday when I graduate, when I've made something of myself, maybe we could have coffee. Not as family, just as people who knew each other once. I considered it. The old Lena would have said yes immediately, would have offered to fly her out, pay for dinner, rebuild the bridge they'd burned. But this Lena had learned the value of maybe. Maybe, I said. Ask me again when you graduate. I will. Take care, Lena. You too. After we hung up, I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, letting the April wind cut through my expensive coat. Tessa would be okay. She'd learned the hard lessons early, but she'd learned them. Maybe that was its own kind of gift. I started walking again, heading home to my high-rise apartment with its lake view and doorman, in blessed distance from everyone who'd ever made me feel small. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket. No crisis calls, no guilt trips, no demands disguised as love. Just silence. Beautiful, expensive, hard-won silence. The price of freedom, I'd learned, wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the courage to say no, the strength to walk away, and the wisdom to know that some bills should never be paid. And that was a currency I'd finally learned to save. October arrived with crisp air and changing leaves. I'd settled into my Chicago life completely now. My apartment felt like home. My team at work operated like a well-oiled machine, and I'd even started dating someone. Marcus from the climbing gym had finally asked me to dinner, and I'd surprised myself by saying yes. But October also brought the final phase of my plan, one I'd been preparing for months without fully admitting it to myself. It started with an email to Patricia. I want to write something, I typed. A document. Not for court, just for me. Maybe for Tessa someday. A full accounting of everything. She called immediately. Are you sure opening all that up again? I've been thinking about it since the hospital visit, I explained. They'll never really understand what they did unless someone spells it out. And I need to spell it out for my own closure. Then do it, she advised. But protect yourself legally. No admissions that could be twisted against you. I spent 3 weeks writing it. Not just the financial losses, though those were documented in excruciating detail, but the invisible costs. The therapy sessions at $150 each. The dates I'd canceled because money was tight. The promotions I nearly missed from stress-induced burnout. The security deposits I'd lost moving to cheaper apartments after draining savings for their emergencies. But I also documented the gifts, the strength I'd built from surviving them, the financial literacy that came from managing crises, the boundaries I'd learned to set, the family I'd chosen instead of the one I'd been given. The final document was 43 pages. I called it a full accounting, 12 years of financial and emotional debt. I printed 3 copies, one for my files, one for Patricia, and one I mailed to my mother's last known address at Aunt Helen's house. The cover letter was brief. Mom, this is not a letter seeking reconciliation or payment. Consider it a final statement on an account that's now closed. I thought you should know the real cost of the choices we all made. I wish you well. Lena. 2 weeks later, my phone rang at work. Aunt Helen, you're a cruel girl, she started without preamble. Sending that manifesto? Your mother had another hard episode after reading it. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because it seems like you wanted to hurt her. No, Aunt Helen. I wanted her to understand. There's a difference. She's your mother, and I was her daughter. That should have meant something, too. She hung up on me. I blocked her number and went back to my spreadsheets. That weekend, clearing out old boxes in my storage unit, I found something I'd forgotten. A birthday card for my 16th birthday. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, to our responsible girl, what would we do without you? I used to think it was praise. Now I saw it for what it was, a cage built from words designed to keep me useful and compliant. I threw it away. November brought surprising news. Tessa had started a blog about her college journey as a first-generation, self-funded student. She wrote about working overnight shifts at Target, studying in break rooms, the shame and pride of food stamps. She never mentioned me by name, but in one post she wrote, I had someone once who sacrificed everything for our family. I watched them pour their life into a bucket with no bottom. I thought that was love. Now, I know love doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I'm learning to build my own heat. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop. She was learning. Maybe that was enough. The IRS settlement check had been earning interest, but I finally decided what to do with part of it. I established a scholarship in my old state university, the Walsh Financial Independence Fund. $25,000 to start, with plans to add more each year. For students escaping financial abuse or supporting themselves after family estrangement. The first recipient was chosen in December. Maria Santos, 19, working full-time while studying accounting after her parents kicked her out for refusing an arranged marriage. No one ever believed I could do this alone, she said when we met for coffee. This scholarship, it's not just money. It's someone saying they believe in me. I do, I told her. And you're not alone. Christmas Eve found me at Marcus's apartment, helping him cook for a gathering of what he called orphan friends, people who, for various reasons, weren't with biological family for the holidays. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and roasting vegetables. Laughter spilled from the living room, where someone had started a board game. You okay? Marcus asked, noticing me staring out the window. First Christmas, completely apart from them. Second, actually, last year I was too angry to feel much. This year, I turned back to him. This year I'm just grateful. He kissed me then, tasting like the wine we'd been testing for the mulled cider. It was warm and safe and uncomplicated. Everything my old life hadn't been. The dinner was chaotic and perfect. 12 people crowded around a table meant for 6, sharing dishes from their various cultures, telling stories that didn't require careful editing. When someone asked about family traditions, I talked about the scholarship fund, about building new traditions based on lifting others up instead of tearing yourself down. That's beautiful, said Claire, who'd fled a cult in Utah. Turning pain into purpose. Still working on it, I admitted. Some days are harder than others. The hard days mean you're human, Marcus said, squeezing my hand under the table. Not that you're failing. After dinner, after the games and gifts and 3 rounds of dessert, I helped with dishes. Through the kitchen window, I could see snow starting to fall. My phone had been silent all day. No guilt trips, no manufactured emergencies, no emotional manipulation wrapped in holiday wishes. Just peace. The next morning, Christmas Day, I did receive one text from Tessa. Merry Christmas, Lena. Thank you for showing me what it costs to save everyone but yourself. I'm learning to save myself first now. Maybe that's the best gift you ever gave me. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Proof that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is show them what not to do. Proof that breaking cycles matters, even when it hurts. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment with hot chocolate and a book, watching snow blanket the city. My bank account was healthy. My credit score had fully recovered. My heart was learning to trust again. The spreadsheet documenting what I'd given my family sat in a filing cabinet, closed and final. But I'd started a new spreadsheet. This one tracking what I was building. Retirement savings, investment returns, charitable donations, the scholarship fund growth. Numbers that represented not what I'd lost, but what I was creating. My phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Lena Walsh. The voice was unfamiliar, elderly. This is Dorothy Chun from Mercy General Billing Department. I'm calling about your mother's account. My stomach dropped. Had she run up more bills? Found another way? We wanted to thank you. Dorothy continued. Your mother informed us yesterday that she secured Medicaid and disability benefits. She also wanted us to know she won't be using you as a financial guarantor anymore. She was quite insistent we remove you from all paperwork. I sat down slowly. She did. Yes, dear, she said, and I quote, my daughter is paid enough. We don't often get that kind of clarity from patients about financial responsibility. I thought you should know. After I hung up, I stood at my window for a long time, watching the snowfall. Maybe people could change. Maybe understanding came too late to repair relationships, but just in time to stop perpetuating damage. Maybe that was its own kind of redemption. I wouldn't be reaching out, wouldn't be reopening doors I'd fought so hard to close. But for the first time, I could wish her well and mean it. Not because she deserved it, but because carrying anger was just another kind of bill I didn't want to pay anymore. That evening, I wrote the last entry in my journal for the year. They say the best revenge is living well. But it's not revenge at all. It's freedom. Freedom to choose your own debts, your own investments, your own returns. Today, my portfolio is diverse. Financial security, chosen family, purposeful work, quiet peace. The market value, incalculable. The ROI, finally positive. 3 years later, I stood in the conference room of a downtown Chicago hotel, adjusting the microphone one last time. The Financial Independence After Abuse workshop was sold out. 50 attendees, all women who'd found themselves trapped in cycles of financial exploitation by family members. My name is Lena Walsh. I began, and I spent 12 years and $128,000 trying to buy love that was never for sale. The room was silent, but I could see the recognition in their eyes. These are my people. The ones who've been trained from childhood that their worth was measured in usefulness, their love in financial output. I told my story without euphemism. The birthday dinner, the slap, the credit fraud, the court cases. But more importantly, I told them about the after, the therapy, the boundaries, the slow rebuild of both credit score and self-worth. The hardest part wasn't the money, I said. It was accepting that the family I kept trying to save was never going to save me back. During the break, a woman approached me. Mid-20s, nervous energy, a designer bag that didn't quite match her worn shoes. My mom's been taking my paycheck since I was 16, she whispered. Says it's for household expenses, but she hasn't worked in years. I want to stop, but she'll say I'm selfish, cold, ungrateful. Her eyes widened. Exactly. I handed her Patricia's business card. Call her. First consultation is free. And remember, you're not selfish for wanting to keep what you earn. That's literally the bare minimum of adult life. The workshop was part of a larger initiative I'd started. The scholarship fund had grown to $100,000, supporting 5 students per year. I'd written a book, The Price of Blood, Breaking Free from Financial Abuse, with all proceeds going to the fund. Corporate speaking engagements brought in more. Marcus, now my husband, joked that I'd turned trauma into a business model, but he supported it. We'd gotten married the previous spring, a small ceremony with our chosen family. No drama, no guilt trips, no family members measuring their love in dollar signs. You saved yourself, he'd said in his vows, and now you're teaching others to do the same. I've never loved anyone more. Tessa had graduated 6 months ago. True to her word, she'd reached out. We met for coffee on neutral ground, a Starbucks halfway between Chicago and her new job in Milwaukee. She looked good, tired the way all recent graduates working entry-level jobs look, but good. Clear-eyed, present. I work in nonprofit financial counseling, she said, helping people in poverty manage debt and build savings. Ironic, right? Or appropriate. I read your book, cried through most of it. Mom refuses to look at it, but I think that's probably healthy for her. We talked for 2 hours, not as sisters, that ship had sailed, but as 2 women who'd survived the same storm from different lifeboats. When we parted, She hugged me. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me what not to become." I didn't promise to stay in touch, neither did she, but we exchanged LinkedIn connections. And sometimes I saw her posts about financial literacy and escaping poverty cycles. She was doing good work, making amends in her own way. Robert was still in prison. The last I'd heard, he'd been transferred to a facility in Texas. The restitution payments continued, $200 a month, as regular as clockwork. I donated them directly to the scholarship fund. Blood money transformed into opportunity. My mother had stabilized in Florida, living on disability and Medicaid in a small apartment Aunt Helen had helped her find. We hadn't spoken since the hospital, but Aunt Helen sent occasional updates I hadn't asked for. Linda's in therapy. Linda joined a church. Linda's volunteering at a food bank. Good for Linda. It had only taken losing everything to find something real. The workshop ended at 4 p.m. Attendees clustered in small groups, exchanging numbers and stories. I'd learned to build community into these events. Isolation was how financial abuse thrived. As I packed up, my phone buzzed with an email from my publisher. The book had hit the New York Times bestseller list for self-help. They wanted to discuss a second edition, maybe a workbook companion. 5 years ago, I couldn't afford dinner at a restaurant. Now, I was teaching others how to reclaim their financial lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. That evening, Marcus and I attended a gala for the Chicago Financial Literacy Foundation. I wore a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent and didn't feel guilty about it. At our table sat Maria Santos, my first scholarship recipient, now a CPA, working with domestic violence survivors. "None of this would exist without you," she said during her speech, gesturing to the room full of donors and advocates. Lena Walsh taught me that walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. But I knew better. It would have existed without me, in some form. Because there were too many of us. The family ATMs. The emotional punching bags with good credit. The daughters and sons who confused exploitation with love. Someone would have built this. I just happened to be the one with the spreadsheets and the anger and the good lawyer. Later, as we walked home along Lake Michigan, Marcus asked, "Any regrets?" I thought about it. About birthdays spent alone and Christmases I'd missed. About a mother who'd chosen a con man over her daughter. About a sister who might have been in a different life. About $128,000 that could have been house payments or vacations or simple security. No, I said finally. Regret would mean wishing it went differently. But it had to go exactly this way for me to become who I am. And I like who I am. He squeezed my hand. So do I. At home, I checked my email one last time. Mixed in with the congratulations and workshop feedback was a message from an unknown address. The subject line read, "From someone who should have protected you." I almost deleted it. Then curiosity won. "I know I have no right to contact you," the email began. "Helen says you're doing amazing things. She sent me an article about your book. I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I won't make excuses because there aren't any. I chose him over you, over and over, until there was nothing left to choose. I just wanted to say I see it now. All of it. The price you paid for my cowardice. The strength it took to stop paying. The grace in how you've turned that pain into purpose. I'm proud of you. Not that my pride matters anymore. But you should know that somewhere in Florida, your mother finally understands what she lost and what you gained by letting go. Be happy. You paid enough for all of us. Linda." I read it twice, then forwarded it to my therapist with a note for discussion next session. Then I closed my laptop and went to find my husband. We had dinner reservations at 8. A new place that didn't take cards. Cash only. The kind of restaurant that would have terrified me once. Now it was just dinner. Just life. Just another choice I could afford to make. The bill, when it came, would be split fairly, paid in full. No hidden costs. No emotional interest. No family discount. That wasn't a discount at all. Just a clean transaction between equals, the way it always should have been. And for that, for the ability to finally freely choose, I was grateful beyond any accounting. So, here's my question for you. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, choosing your own peace over their expectations? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.